Coming up on Chopper's Brexit podcast.
Remember at the beginning of this process, back in 2016, I said it won't be the first 3 years that matter, it will be the last 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 seconds.
Hello and welcome to Chopper's Brexit Podcast. I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's chief political correspondent. Well, it's August and many of us have managed to get away for a bit of time over the summer, maybe even a holiday or two. But I'm back here doing a podcast for your delectation. Now, it's a busy week for Boris Johnson, the busiest week he's had on a diplomatic stage since he became Prime Minister about a month ago. This week, he's written to Donald Tusk a 4-page letter saying why he thinks the EU should agree to rip up this dreaded Northern Ireland backstop. And then the end of the week, he's been with German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin and lunch with President Emmanuel Macron from France. And the key thing has been, can they deal with a backstop? And Angela Merkel even gave Boris Johnson 30 days to find alternative arrangements to see what they can do to sort out this problem. So after 3 years, we're getting near to the end of this Brexit nightmare for so many people. And to give you some light relief, we've got Leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, the chairman still of the European Research Group of Tory MPs, who's lending us his dulcet tones to perform some brilliant Brexit poems written by Telegraph readers. You may remember that Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate, has no intention of composing a poem to mark Brexit in October. So luckily, Telegraph readers have stepped up with their words to fill the gap left by Mr. Armitage. And we'll be catching up with our Brexit correspondent, James Rothwell, who's on the border in Northern Ireland and Ireland, to tell us whether he thinks the backstop can be ripped up. But first up, with me now in the studio at Telegraph Towers is former Brexit Secretary David Davis, collecting a copy of that letter from Boris Johnson to Donald Tusk to tell us why he thinks this could be the way to sort out the Brexit impasse. David, welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. This letter that Boris Johnson has sent to Donald Tusk, it's basically saying everything you were trying to say before you had to resign over Brexit under Theresa May's government, isn't it?
Yes, it's exactly right. It's the right tone. I mean, you get lots of criticism back from the European Union, of course, but it's the right tone. It's saying this is a negotiation. These are our red lines in effect. I tend not to use that phrase, but that's what they keep calling them. And this is what we want. And it's reasonable. It's firm. And that's what you have to be, I'm afraid, with the European Union.
And he's effectively saying also that if you put up border checkpoints, we're not going to do it. I mean, and that's...
No, and we don't need to. I mean, if we're talking about Northern Ireland, I mean, the issue for us in Northern Ireland is all about peace. It's all about politics. The economics we can swallow, because it's a relatively small part of our economy, and we are determined. And we get lectured about the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah.
The truth is, the biggest threat to the Good Friday Agreement is actually the European proposals, because they haven't read them properly, because in there it says you've got to carry all communities with you. Certainly both the major communities, but all communities with you. Not a simple majority overall, but all communities have got to come with you. That's the whole point of it. And that's why David Trimble, who bluntly, a Nobel Prize winner, put his life on the line, his job on the line for this agreement, knows it backwards, knows Northern Ireland backwards, knows more about it than anybody else, and he basically is supportive of what we're trying to do with the alternative arrangements.
Yeah, exactly. Were you part of are you advising the government at all now, or are you basically freelancing?
No, I confer with Boris moderately frequently, as you might imagine,
yes,
because we're old mates, we're old friends. And I was involved in the commission that's just published recently on...
Yeah, the Greg Hans, Nicky Morgan report.
That's right. I mean, note, Greg Hans and Nicky Morgan both voted Remain.
Yeah.
These are not mad sort of out on the limb Brexiteers, Brexit any price to Brexiteers. These are people who want to read...
It's a serious report, and we'll put it into the show notes of this podcast. There's a serious report there, isn't it?
Nicky was the chairman of the Treasury Select Committee. Greg was a trade minister. They both know what they're talking about,
And their idea, which, you can say what it is, but these mobile checks, checking on livestock, trusted trader schemes, electronic customs clearance checks, that all means no hard border, doesn't it?
That's right. And all of it, people keep talking about a technological solution as though it's some sort of wild tomorrow's world thing. Actually, it's not. It's technology that exists today and is used today. One of the experts, a couple of experts, Shankar Singham, who I think you've dealt with before on this podcast.
Right, in Thursday's Telegraph as
That's
well.
right, and a Dutch customs expert, who's one of the leading European customs experts, have said this can be done. This is practical, and in a lot of it's using existing technical rather than technological existing mechanisms. Last year, the customs HMRC in Northern Ireland caught an attempt to smuggle 8 million cigarettes, right? Not a small catch. How do they do that? By intelligence-led customs monitoring. That's how you do it in circumstances like this.
Is 30 days Angela Merkel trap or a realistic timetable? Because she'd be saying, well, I gave you 30 days, Boris, you couldn't do it, we did all we could to avoid no deal, or is it a realistic attempt?
Well, I was going to say, this is not down to Whitehall, it's down to the European Union. When we put these proposals to them before, they said, oh, magical thinking. Remember that phrase? Magical thinking. And yet a few months later, when they wanted to provide an invisible border between between Northern Ireland and the mainland of the UK, they wanted to use the same. They were the same mechanisms. What they called magical thinking 1 month in one context was entirely workable in another. So they've got to show willing. If we all want to protect peace in Northern Ireland, we all want to have no hard border. We can do it if they engage properly. And the first sign of that, by the way, will be when the Irish customs start talking on a week-to-week basis to HMRC again, as they were back in 2016, and then they stopped suddenly in 2017, around about the time that Mr. Varadkar took over. I don't know whether it was him or his predecessor that stopped it under pressure from the European Union. I don't know. But if they really want to treat peace seriously, they should actually engage.
Now, we're yet to hear what Emmanuel Macron says to Boris Johnson, because we're recording this on Thursday morning before the meeting in Paris at lunchtime. Is there a division between, it looks like a good cop, bad cop narratives emerging already?
There always is. There's a different perspective of this. I mean, in a way, we're raining on Macron's parade. Macron is the most federalist European leader, really. He is making his name in that. He's having trouble at home with the Gilets jaunes, and the economy's not too great and all the rest of it. So this is a way of his making his place in history, I guess. Yeah. And so he's very unhappy with us doing this. He has in the past intervened to block progress. Again, casting our minds back to October of 2017, I think it was, he was the one who stopped sufficient progress being declared in October. Yeah. All right.
Which delayed till December.
And then that led into the Irish situation and so on. Whereas Barnier was going to declare sufficient progress, even though we'd had a tough summer beating them down.
And this deadline in October is his deadline, don't forget, from back in March. He made this deadline.
Indeed it is. So we mustn't expect him to be helpful. I mean, to be frank with you, I thought we got more out of the Merkel meeting than I would have expected. We will get less out of Macron than anybody expects, I think. It would be my guess. And we are talking before it happens. For one tactical reason as well, and it's this. Europe is still hoping against hope this is not going to happen. I had a conversation this morning with...
Brexit at all, or no Brexit? Just Brexit?
No Brexit, yeah. I had a conversation this morning with one of the ministers who had worked with me, one of the European ministers, and he was just asked me how it was going. And he said a number of leaders in Europe still hope it won't happen. So what they're hanging on is what happens in September in Parliament. You see, this is what Boris was alluding to with his conversation, his talk about them. And for as long as they hold out the option, they might block no deal. They can't, or exit under no deal circumstances, or that they might overturn the government, which I don't think they can either. For as long as that's in play, why should the other side give up anything?
But start work now is a good thing.
Yeah. And I think what Merkel was doing was giving enough reason to get to work on it. So when we get to the beginning of October will be the key month in negotiating terms. When we get to the beginning of October, then we'll have some work under our belt. We'll have some preparation done. Remember at the beginning of this process, back in 2016, I said it won't be the first 3 years that matter. It will be the last 3 weeks, 3 days, 3 hours, 3 minutes, 3 seconds. And that's exactly
busy October. In that letter from Boris Johnson to Donald Tusk, he said that he's confident that our Parliament will be able to act rapidly if we were able to reach a satisfactory agreement which did not contain the backstop. If the backstop was removed from that document, it's on page 4 of the letter there. Yeah. If that was removed from the agreement, could you vote for the agreement?
Well, I did actually vote, holding my nose, to be frank.
MV3?
MV2 and 3, you see, because I could see the chaos coming. I could see this, what I called a collapse into catastrophe, which is what happened. And the government went, basically, and new government. It still wouldn't be a great agreement, and it's only a first stepping stone, but it would make it viable. I mean, the thing I'd say to you is, if you look at Parliament has never been able to agree on anything. No. All the various options put in front of them, with one exception. The one exception was the so-called Brady Amendment.
Yes, it was.
Now, what Brady was in effect the withdrawal agreement with the alternative arrangements tacked on, right? So actually, and if we're right on top of the end of October, and Parliament, well, something like Brady 2 probably, and something like the alternative arrangements, then and the option for Parliament is either that or no deal. They'll vote for it.
Because they've got to. I mean, Bill Cash and others have concerns about this joint committee.
Oh, yeah.
Which says unelected officials running relationships. There's the ECJ jurisdiction. There's a big bill to pay. And those three things are a problem for Brexit.
There are lots wrong with it. But I think, the other thing I would, if I were doing this for Boris, I would be insistent on it, and I will suggest it to him at some point, is that they make the bill, the 39 billion, the second half of it, contingent on progress on the future economic partnership.
Yeah.
That's, you see, you've got basically, you think of it in round numbers. Let's say it's 39 billion. It might be 35. It might be a touch more than 39. But let's say it's 39.
Some which have been paid down already, by the way.
But the first 21 months, or less than that now, it's about 18 months, I think, or 15 months. The first, you'll be paying out about 10 billion a year. So half of it will be gone. All right, so we'd be down to the last 20, say, in round numbers. We should say that comes up to be paid at the end of the implementation period. We should have in place a future economic partnership, or the bones of it anyway, so that we carry on with free trade arrangements. Yeah. Beyond that, before we pay the next 20 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And that stage payment is something which has been mooted before, maybe by you, I think.
By me in the beginning. Barney used to get very cross with me. No, you cannot make cannot make it your repayment of your debts contingent on a deal.
It makes a degree of sense.
And I just said, it isn't. They aren't our debts.
So just very, would you vote for the agreement shorn of the backstop?
Well, I would argue for a few changes as well. I'd argue for contingency on the money. I'd argue for tighter limits, timetable limits, sunset clauses on ECJ and things like that. So I'd have a small shopping list. It wouldn't be a ridiculous one, but one I think which, with any serious European Parliament and any European Council that wants a deal, could go with.
David Davis, thank you once again for coming into Chopper's Brexit Podcast.
Entirely my pleasure.
So David Davis there said that he could possibly, maybe, with some changes, vote for the withdrawal agreement without the Northern Ireland backstop in it. And this week, as you heard earlier, Boris Johnson wrote to European Council President Donald Tusk calling for the Irish backstop to be scrapped, calling it undemocratic. So I'm going to give a ring to James Rothwell, the Telegraph's Brexit correspondent, who's out there in the field.
Hello.
Hi, James. Hi, it's Christopher Hope here on Chopper's Brexit Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
But where are you? Not in the office. I can't see you in the office. Where are you?
No, I'm not in the office. I've escaped. I've escaped to the Irish border, actually. I'm on the Northern Irish side of the border right now, reporting on the latest reaction to the Brexit backstop.
Goodness gracious. And of course, overnight, we've had Angela Merkel telling Boris Johnson to sort it out in 30 days. How's that gone down?
Well, actually, interestingly, it's not gone down terribly well in Ireland. I've actually just been speaking to a local politician who said that he felt that Mrs. Merkel may have made a bit of a boo-boo because they've noticed that immediately this suggestion that it might possibly be solved in 30 days has given the Brexiteers false hope. And that's because here in Ireland, they just do not believe that a solution can be found in as little time as 30 days. And that's because they say the only solution that exists is the backstop itself.
Of course, Boris Johnson alluded to this 270-page report by Greg Hands and Nicky Morgan, in which it talks about all sorts of ways to deal with a backstop, such as mobile examinations on livestock and crops, trusted trader status, and electronic customs clearance checks. I mean, surely if there's a will, there's a way.
Well, that report has been pored over carefully by politicians in Northern Ireland, and they have deep reservations about it. They say, having consulted with EU officials, that it's not compliant with European Union law. And they've also got concerns about the import and exports of live animals across the border, because EU rules state that you've got to do a physical inspection of those. And they say there hasn't been any technology invented yet which can inspect an animal invisibly as it passes over a border point in a truck. So they're not yet convinced, but who knows? Let's wait and see.
And we're talking about the border. I mean, describe for our listeners who haven't been to the border of Northern Ireland and Ireland, what's it look like?
Well, I mean, it's completely invisible. There is virtually no way of telling at the moment that a border exists in some parts. You can drive across it without realising it. The only clue that you have that you've moved from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland is that the road markings are slightly different. There are some parts here where the border crisscrosses over the middle of farmers' fields. In some places, it is aligned with a river, which makes a slightly more visible crossing point. But what everyone over here is worried about is a situation is where you start having to put up customs posts and check vehicles. And they're not just worried about that because of the economic disruption it would cause, but also because it would bring back those awful memories of the troubles when, people were being stopped at checkpoints and having their cars searched. And there is, fair to say, immense reluctance almost universally here to go back to anything resembling that arrangement.
Yes, and what Boris Johnson would say to that, were he to come on this podcast, is he has no intention of putting up any border posts at all, and if the EU want to do it, it's up to them. Why can't the EU say no checks either, and then they agree to muddle through with checking on livestock, mobile checks at the checks at the ports, not the border, all the stuff you know about in that report? Why not just do that? And because isn't a canard a kind of a straw man to talk about the idea of border posts when no one wants them?
Well, the EU's own rules state that member states have got to protect their external borders. They have a legal obligation to do it. And if they don't, then they risk being punished. And that includes potentially being kicked out of the single market. So that means that the Republic of Ireland has got a legal obligation to make sure that no goods which don't meet EU rules and regulations are able to slip over the border into the Republic of Ireland. And some rules specifically state on the EU side that you've got to do those checks physically at the border. And that's why, from their perspective, this is so extraordinarily complicated and difficult. And of course, if they did move the checks to, say, the Irish Sea border as a sort of alternative arrangement, well, that's pretty much what the backstop proposes anyway, which is to do your checks at places like the Port of Larne. The problem with that, though, and which is what the DUP is not very happy about, is that you then create a sort of trade border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, which in the DUP's opinion would undermine the Britishness of the area of Northern Ireland. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yes, or between Boris Johnson and Angela Merkel, whichever that you might just not describe that as. Do you think that any of the ideas in this document, again by Nicky Morgan and Greg Hands, are possible? I mean, they say that all of this stuff, they aren't unicorn ideas. They're ideas that actually exist and can be applied and to sort out Brexit within around 3 years, is what the report says.
Yes, so the report is a combination of existing customs techniques, sort of best practice of customs procedures that already happen. Boris Johnson's mentioned one of them several times already, which is electronic pre-clearing. Now, so my opinion is that the customs side of this is not beyond the wit of man to solve, because if you're able to have a system where you can, for example, track a shipment by GPS as it goes over the border, having already done an inspection and a plea declaration, then the customs side of things might be workable. But the much more difficult and complicated area of the border, which doesn't get discussed as much, is stuff like food, plants, animals and live animals. And that's where it's really difficult, because the rules say that you've got to do some of those checks at the border itself, which of course is a problem, because the whole point of this exercise is to evolve checks on the border. It doesn't look like the EU is going to change that rule. And unless those rules were changed, to me, it seems basically impossible for any kind of technology to be produced that can work its way around that. But there is another element to this, which is, let's just say for the sake of argument that this is purely a political problem and not a legalistic problem. Let's just say for the sake of argument that everything in that report actually does work. And it's just the EU being difficult or Ireland being difficult. The problem is that politically, they're always going to say no, because the backstop is, frankly, a lot more convenient for them than spending several years trying to draw up an extremely fiendishly complicated procedure. And obviously, they're our negotiating partner, so we've got to come to an agreement with them. So we get back to the same issue as ever, which is that, both sides have become very deeply entrenched in opposing positions.
James Rothwell, the Telegraph's Brexit correspondent, reporting in live from the Northern Ireland border. Thank you for coming on Chopper's Brexit podcast.
Thanks, Chris.
That was James Rothwell there on the border of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now stay with us. We'll be right back with some very funny Brexit poetry, including a brilliant poem composed by Jacob Rees-Mogg's sister, Annunziata, performed by her brother, Jacob Rees-Mogg himself, right after this.
Order! The Prime Minister will be aware that Podcast Live Politics will return to London on Saturday, October 5th.
Indeed, I imagine people in this house will enjoy seeing Chopper's Brexit Podcast and the Delling Pod, whilst the Honourable Gentleman will no doubt enjoy seeing Polling Politics to see how badly he and his party are doing.
Typical Tory bluster. I believe the Prime Minister would benefit from seeing the new European podcast, UK in a Changing Europe, and to think about Ian Dale and Jackie Smith's For the Many.
Order! Whether the House wishes to see talking politics or escape Brexit with the week unwrapped, there will be plenty of room for everyone. Even the Liberal Democrats can see never mind the bar charts. And all of these podcasts are live in London on October 5th. Indeed, tickets are available now from podcastlive.com. Unlock!
Now, welcome back to Chopper's Brexit podcast. Now, key readers of the Telegraph and its website, telegraph.co.uk, will know that Simon Armitage, the Poet Laureate, is so far saying he will not write a poem to mark Britain's exit from the EU on October 31st. Not surprisingly, Telegraph readers were concerned about this and sent in their poems by the dozen to the Telegraph. And therefore, armed with a sheaf of these excellent dirges, I tracked down Leader of the House of Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, early this week, who was very keen to read them out for you to cheer you up in these long summer days. Normally we give you time off from the podcast, given it's summer, but you couldn't resist getting involved, could you, with the Poet Laureate Simon Armitage saying he has no plans to mark Brexit with a poem?
Well, you kindly asked me to pen a few lines, not that I'm of the standard of an illustrious Poet Laureate, but exactly. I had a go and we worked on it together to come up with a little limerick.
Well, I was able to help with the final line because I think you were slightly stuck. Would you want to read out what your poem was?
What did I write? The Poet Laureate used to be paid in sherry, which made him decidedly merry. Now he's paid in hard cash, which makes him awfully slapdash. But when it comes to Brexit, he needn't be wary.
Very good.
The Poet Laureate used to get a butt of sherry as part of the compensation being Poet Laureate. Actually, it's listed as a butt of Canary wine, but that is basically sherry.
Okay.
And a butt...
It's not a water butt.
It's not a water butt.
Right.
A butt is 2 hogsheads.
Yes, okay. Keep talking, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, your listeners do, because Telegraph listeners and readers are fully au fait with the imperial system. And a hogshead is, I believe, between 63 and 140 gallons. So if we take it at the upper limit, that is 280 gallons of sherry, which seems quite a good reward.
That is a lot of sherry.
Well, I think it's probably the equivalent of about £20,000
Yes.
in cash. So I hope...
The Telegraph can do that.
Well, I hope the Telegraph is going to award at least a bottle of sherry.
A bottle of sherry, I think.
To the top entrant.
The top entrant.
And I think it should be Tio Pepe, because that's my personal sherry
Tio
of
Pepe
choice.
sherry, well...
And if the Telegraph doesn't, I will offer a bottle of Tio Pepe sherry to the
keep sending them
best
in, listeners.
Poem or limerick, though we count a limerick as a poem, that comes in.
Now, all of our listeners are, as they should be, feet up on the Sun Lounger. They're in Cornwall, they're in the Lake District in Scotland, they might be overseas. They're just relaxing. So I think with your dulcet tones, Jacob, you can cheer them up with some Brexit poems, which Simon Armitage so far has refused to pen. So you got some here, haven't you?
Well, lots of limericks. So Kerry Costello wrote, "A laureate poet declined to write a few words he opined that leaving was bad. He's obviously mad. When we go, we should leave him behind."
Okay, good.
Sarah Taylor said, "What's chubby then skinny, what rises and falls, what's great in the chamber, a Johnson with balls."
That's
Sandy
Boris Johnson, of course.
O'Mahan penned, "The EU's a sham, we don't give a damn. We don't give a hoot, give them the Agincourt salute."
That's two fingers.
I'm well aware, yes, and I hope your reasoned listeners aren't too shocked. Christopher Joel said, "Merkel to Macron I might, tell Boris we'll put up no fight. No way, Mutty dear, he said looking queer, it'll be all right on the night." Edward Lear would be proud of these.
Oh, yes.
So we're getting lots in. We've had a longer one from Liz Makachek, who I think really is an entrant to be the next poet laureate. "Poet laureate, what a weed, deserting in our hour of need. I can write a little rhyme to mark this most auspicious time. Open English sparkling wine, settle fireworks if it's fine. Celebrate and be ecstatic, Britain's free and democratic." Oh, I like ecstatic and democratic, very, very good. "No more wasting precious cash on stupid Brussels-Strasbourg dash. Bid farewell to gravy train, we can be ourselves again. Unelected bureaucrats, unaccountable fat cats, federal Europe, what a con. You can keep it. We are gone."
Yes, marvellous. Now, here's a take on the second verse of Jerusalem. By William Blake.
Well, I won't sing.
No, you can sing if you like.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's only me and Elliot listening.
Indeed. "Bring me my passport of blue and gold. Bring me the freedoms we desire. Bring me Brexit, the details unfold. Bring me a policy more clear. We will not cease from mental fight until the backstop's finally banned, till we honour the referendum in Britain's green and pleasant land."
Good. Not England, but Britain.
Oh, yes, it should be the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Kate Hoey will be cross with me for reading that one out.
Well, literally hundreds sent in, Jacob, after you offered a butt of sherry paid for by the Telegraph.
And a huge number on Twitter as well, yes. "There was a new word called Brexit, but the Remainers wanted to check it. The harder they tried and the more they lied, the more certain became our exit." That was from Andrew Luce.
That's very good.
And Richard Tracy, not the special agent, Dick, of the same name, "We're on our way to freedom in spite of Gawk and Grieve and all those other..." Oh, I'm not good, that's unfair. I don't want to call them that. Yes.
You can censor because, you know...
I have censored, I'm frightfully sorry.
Do you think we should have some stirring music underneath these poems? Elgar's Nimrod would be nice, what do you think?
Well, I tell you, I've got...
You're going to put something on your phone? That might...
I have some immediately to hand. Let's see.
That's good. Is that okay? Okay, and what is that?
Lily Bolero.
Lily Bolero.
The BBC used to broadcast this on the World Service. It would say, "This is London," and then Lily Bolero would play.
Did it?
Yeah.
That's marvellous. That's like sailing by at the end of the evening.
That's right. And you'd go from sailing by, you'd have the national anthem as Radio 4 closed down, then you go on to the World Service, which would start up with Lily Bolero before the midnight news.
Wow. Did you miss the 6 a.m. they used to have the patriotic montage?
Oh, yes, that was great, though I wasn't normally up at that time.
It was banned and replaced by more news. You know it, don't you?
Yeah, it got really boring.
That's a mistake. That's a mistake. I mean,
it was absolutely lovely if one woke early.
Yes. Here we are. Here's one. This one here, it's not named, so it's anonymous there, the Irish backstop.
Okay. "The Irish backstop not yet gone, and getting it removed, I'd say, becomes less likely by the day. The situation those unsure, for Mrs May could not procure. Agreement changed from the EU, and MPs wanting it were few. And Boris has had no more luck, so maybe we will all be stuck, with no deal Brexit as foreseen upon the night of Halloween. Are we downhearted? No, we're not. For once, if Europe we've got shot, more opportunities arise. with those who really are allies.
Oh, clever.
Very good.
Very good. Now we're going on to Twitter now, trying to find
some of the Twitter ones are quite good.
Yes.
I like this one from Pat, with apologies to the Poet Laureate. There once was a Romani old poet who couldn't write verse, don't you know it? No words could he spew as we left the EU, so he hid in a room with some moet.
Very good.
That is to say French sparkling wine.
Yes.
So I think we're now going to call it.
Some of them are quite rude.
Yes. Well,
We're not going to ruin the listeners' holidays, are we, with rude ones?
no, they wouldn't like that. I wandered lonely as a Remainer. My thoughts on losing my EU retainer. A sinking ship, I hear you cry. No food or drink can we buy. Better to live in a place of democracy than to suffer under autocracy. The price of freedom we must bear. We will do better out of there. That's from Alan Chapman.
That's not bad.
I think that's really good.
He started off with Wordsworth, didn't he, and have disappeared.
Yes.
Slightly.
The beginning was
We
excellent.
mustn't be too cruel, though. But I wandered lonely as a Remainer. That could come to pass if Brexit happens.
Yes, indeed.
In a way that when we started out back in 2010-11, only a few people wanted to leave the whole thing automatically, and then it became a thing, and as the chance came.
David Warren. We voted to leave, there is no doubt, but the Cabinet messed us about. Then Mrs May was shown the exit, so now Boris can deliver Brexit.
Oh.
That's very good.
Yes, that's straightforward, isn't it?
Yes.
Any more there?
Mog in the fog is boiling the frog, from Colin Alston. I'm not quite sure what that means. The mog on the Tyne is all mine, all mine. Well, I'm not sure about that one either.
That's a song by Gaza called Fog on the Tyne, you see. Is
it popular music?
It was, yes, back in 94, 3 or 4, yes. There's a song by Gaza, yes.
Right, I'm afraid I don't remember that.
Yes. Here we are, here's one. Andrew H. Chapman.
Andrew H. Chapman. In spite of the Beeb and Sky News, who broadcast peculiar views, we voted to leave and for us to believe in our own law and order and control of our border. And there's nothing to gain if we were to remain. It's a disintegrating, violent, frustrating, undemocratic setup that's lunatic.
Yes. Good.
All right, what about George?
Come on, George.
The blue of the EU will poo-poo what we do. So then when we leave, people call Dominic will grieve, Anna will seethe, but we can all breathe. And when we go under WTO, our economy will grow. We can say, told you so.
Yes, that's good.
Yes.
That's good. Any more?
Eric Rasmussen. The UK decided to Brexit. Mrs May decided to hex it. No one could see quite how to agree, and now young Boris directs it.
Very good. Now, we'll just a few more, and then we'll let you go, Jacob.
So this is from Ian McGee. Britain's flag is red, white and blue. On the October 31st, we leave the EU. Leavers will cheer, Remainers will be blue. Into the future goes the UK, me and you.
Here's one. Pip Stewart.
Pip Stewart. We want to leave, oh joy. We get a vote, oh joy. We win, oh joy. We wait, oh boy.
Yes.
Very good.
Interesting structure here. But he has really tickled the fancy here, people.
Yes.
Will you be writing to the Poet Laureate?
No.
Suggesting?
No, I wish the Poet Laureate well.
Yes, it's a free country.
It's a free country, and the Poet Laureate has no specific responsibilities.
No. He's paid, isn't he?
Gets a modest stipend.
Modest stipend, yeah.
And no longer they modernised it. It used to be a job for life.
Yes.
With a butt of sherry. They were given the monetary equivalent.
Yes.
And then it got changed into a paid stipend for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Is there one or two last ones before we have to let you go? There you are. Here's Sherry. Sherry's written one for you.
Ah.
Yes, here's Sherry.
Excellent. In 2016, Cameron not keen. EU so blue as the results are so true. 17.4 at PM May's door. We want out without any doubt. She couldn't do it and the UK knew it. So out May goes, and God truly knows that Boz is the man that definitely can. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry.
Sherry for Sherry.
Yes. One last one on your phone there.
There once was a poetic snowflake who refused to give and to take. While we enjoyed Brexit, he just didn't get it. That's what he'd been fed was all fake.
Now, your family's got involved too, haven't they,
Annunziata, my great sister, yes.
Now, let me just...
Actually, this is a very good one. I'll do this one.
Okay.
The British bulldog will be back as soon as EU gets the sack. So raise up your glasses when the 31st passes. 3 cheers, old Blighty is back.
Yes. Now, you sent me a text with a poem from your infant sister, who, of course, is...
Oh, my infant sister is Annunziata Rees-Mogg,
MEP?
member of the European Parliament.
What's her offering from Brussels?
I'm not sure she's allowed to enter, so Annunziata, if you're listening, I probably feel you can't win the sherry. The British voted for Brexit. Remainers attempted to wreck it, but leavers fought on, so soon we'll be gone. As we thrive on the outside, will they get it? I mean, that is genius.
Yes,
you can
tell
tell
I think on
that Annunziata has poetic blood.
She's a poet and doesn't really know it.
No.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you for inviting us in. I know it's a busy time for you in August, given what's going on in politics, but I think reading these poems will have cheered up our listeners on their sunbeds. What do you think?
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm full of confidence and optimism, and Telegraph readers take these things in the right spirit. It is quite funny, though. There are a few very po-faced Remainers who have made comments about how we should take life very seriously and shouldn't have a bit of poetry to cheer us up. But I think Telegraph readers know better.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you to my guests, David Davis, James Rothwell, and of course, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Thanks to the podcast producers, Theo Laludis and Elliot Lampitt. If you're all caught up on the podcast and twiddling your thumbs, head to telegraph.co.uk/chopper, where you can get access to the Telegraph's online content completely free of charge for a whole month. What a deal! If you'd like to get in contact on social media, tweet us at Brexit Broadcast or email us choppersbrexitpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Please do leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people find the show. And big thanks this week to Neverna 1990 and 1963 Every Nickname Taken for your 5-star reviews. They can't be your real names. And always buy a copy of the Daily Telegraph. Until next time, cheerio!
Hello, Chopper listeners. My name's Danny Boyle and I'm the Telegraph's Commuter Editions editor, which means it's my job to provide you with great journalism that makes your journey to and from work as enjoyable as possible. I can't prevent train delays or guarantee you won't get caught in the rain, but I can make sure you're up to date with the best of the Telegraph every morning and evening. And I just wanted to let you know about one of the ways you can get all that in audio form. All you need to do is join my WhatsApp group. Every weekday, my colleague Chris Price and I bring you short audio briefings directly to your smartphone at 8 in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon. And the best bit? It's completely free to sign up and easy. Just click on the link in the show notes for this episode. I look forward to having you as a group member soon.